Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Table and Plate Project Delta podcast. We've been on hiatus for a year or so, but this past February 22nd, we began to re-engage and share our thoughts again. You're joining me, Dr. Ellen Harris, as I learn, explore, discover, experience, and talk about food, culture, and community in the Mississippi Delta and beyond. As we start back up with our podcast, we'll be featuring the Cookbook Club Sunday Dinner gatherings this year. Today, we're featuring the April 19th Cookbook Club Sunday Dinner. Usually, these dinners are held in person and virtually with friends in Mississippi and other parts of the country. There's usually a theme, a featured cookbook. We talk, share stories, present the dish or meal we each prepared, eat, and then bid each other farewell until next time. 2 years ago, we also added a segment where we discuss a pre-selected food-related book. This year, we also may invite co-hosts and guests to talk about special food topics. How we flow will just depend on who's willing or has the time to participate. We're experiencing a time where protection and nurturing of soul and spirit are extremely important. To take care of others, you must take care of yourself. Reduce stress and garner strength for you and community. Our platform is meant to contribute to that effort and go wherever spirit takes us. Today, our theme is Waste Not, Want Not, and we're discussing food loss and the importance of preserving food, especially within the African American community, where resourcefulness and tradition have long helped families stretch meals and protect precious food resources. Joining me today is Dr. Deirdra Chester, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist and who is dedicated to working with communities on issues related to food. Today, she will discuss or focus on food preservation, sustainability, and food education. Deirdra, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ellen. I'm very excited to talk about a topic that connects food, culture, and community empowerment. And this time, when our food costs are soaring, it is important to reflect on methods that our ancestors used to ensure that there was not waste of food, which speaks to the title of this podcast episode, Waste Not, Want Not.
So, Deirdra, let's start with the basics. When we talk about food loss and food waste, what do those terms actually mean?
Well, food loss usually happens earlier in the supply chain. So that's usually during farming, harvesting, storage, or transportation. But food waste tends to happen later at grocery stores, restaurants, and even in our homes. In the US, a huge amount of food ends up thrown away every year, even while many communities struggle with food access.
And how does food loss and waste affect communities, particularly African American communities?
Well, in many African American communities, we see higher rates of food insecurity. But at the same time, food can still be wasted because of lack of access to storage knowledge, time, or preservation resources. Historically, though, our communities develop amazing strategies to prevent waste, like pickling, canning, smoking meat, and cooking creatively with leftovers.
So, food preservation has deep roots in our history and cultural food habits. Can you talk about how these traditions developed?
Absolutely. During slavery and throughout the early 20th century, African Americans often had to make the most of limited food resources. Techniques like curing meat, drying vegetables, fermenting foods, and canning helped families survive. These practices were passed down through generations, grandmothers teaching children how to preserve food from gardens or seasonal harvests. But today we can look back at our ancestors and learn from the methods that they used. Although their methods are similar to those listed above, I would like to highlight some additional techniques. And these include freezing fruits and vegetables before they spoil to use them in smoothies, soups, and stewed dishes. You can also pickle leftover vegetables, including peppers, cucumbers, and tomatoes. And another way that you can preserve some of those foods is really by growing your own food and learning how to can. You can reach out to your local extension office and they have classes on canning. So these are some very creative ways that we can use today to help us ensure that we're not wasting any food.
So I'm gonna sort of get you to repeat some of that, but I want to ask you, what are some traditional preservation methods still used today?
So some common ones that we still use today are like canning vegetables and fruits, pickling cucumbers, peppers, and okra, freezing garden produce, drying herbs, vegetables, and fruit, and smoking or curing meats. Many of these methods not only prevent waste, but they also keep cultural food traditions alive. I think one of the things that we struggle with today is that we're kind of like a little hesitant. An example of that is like freezing garden produce. There are people that say, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can freeze these tomatoes. But my thing is, if you pick those tomatoes and they're fresh, it's similar to buying tomatoes in the frozen aisle. And so you would be freezing them, but what you would use those for is you might use them for a stew, you might use them for spaghetti sauce. So it means that even if you get a loss in texture, you don't lose the very essence of that tomato. So what we have to do is kind of get over our fear of freezing foods so that we can make sure that we don't waste any food.
Excellent. So for listeners who want to reduce food waste at home, what are some simple things they can start doing right away?
So I always look at kind of like these 3 easy steps. So the first one is the plan meals before grocery shopping. The most important thing that we can do is don't purchase more than we need. Only purchase enough that you can store in the fridge or refrigerator. Purchase your staple items every 2 weeks, depending on how long these items will stay fresh. Number two, store food properly so that it lasts longer. So you can buy your meats in bulk and divide and freeze for later use. If you are a person that likes smoothies, even as you purchase like your berries, apples, or anything that would go into a smoothie, you can divide them as soon as you purchase them and freeze them right away. And so that's proper storage because those are items that you're going to blend up anyway. So it doesn't really matter if that banana that you frozen has the same texture because you're going to throw it in a smoothie. So always lead with storing the food properly, dividing and freezing for later use. And then the third one is using leftovers creatively. You want to freeze vegetables before they spoil. You can freeze leftover vegetables like sweet potatoes, parsnips, rutabagas, onions, tomatoes. I like all of these because I will just make me a simple roasted vegetables. Those are items that you can freeze, you can unfreeze them, and then you can roast them. They can be easily roasted later. They can also be used for soups, stews, and stir fries. So you also want to make sure that when you have fruit, I am really good at this. If I buy some blackberries and I've used them in my yogurt and I see that, they're getting a little soft, I freeze those because I want to freeze them before they spoil because I know that that's an item that I can use for a smoothie later.
Okay, so to really ground this message in, I'm going to ask you again, what are some beginner-friendly food preservation methods people can try?
So I think the beginner ones are just some simple ones. So just freezing fruits and vegetables. And that's just a Ziploc bag. You don't have a fancy machine that takes the air out. Just put it in a simple Ziploc bag. Quick pickling of vegetables. There are so many recipes where you just take a ball mason jar, and you're going to put vegetables in it. And there are quick recipes where you add vinegar, you might add a little sugar, but just find a nice recipe that you like. Those are very simple that you can do. And also like making jams or fruit preserves. This is a good way if you have leftover fruit. You freeze it, and then it's something that you want to get a little recipe, and you're like, okay, I have this big bag of blueberries that were going to go bad, but I've been kind of putting it in a bag, and then you get a quick recipe for jams or fruit preserves. Storing your herbs in oil or freezing them in ice cubes. I know herbs are the ones I grow herbs, but it's like sometimes I don't grow enough, and I cannot stand when I go to the grocery store and I buy some thyme and it's like 2 days later, it looks like it's going bad. That's the time that you want to take that thyme or rosemary and you want to put it in a jar, and you may want to make some rosemary olive oil from it. Or another one is freezing them in ice cubes. So these are some simple ways that you can really start to hone your skills of not wasting. And these methods really don't require expensive equipment, and they can actually help make food last longer.
Yes, I use some of those simple methods. I have a home garden, and when I get, for example, a bumper crop of cucumbers, I give some to neighbors, and the rest I eat fresh or cut up and do my version of quick pickling, like using vinegar, all kinds of vinegars. You can use, apple cider, you can use rice vinegar, whatever vinegar you have at home. And I'm add just a bit of cane sugar, not a whole lot, unless I'm seeking to get sweet pickles. But I'm usually more the sort of savory, spicy type. And I use various spices to taste. And when I want an extra kick, I add crushed red pepper that I've grown in my garden, dried and crushed. And to tell you the truth, I'll probably never ever buy crushed red pepper again because my version is mwah. I also dehydrate fruit. I have a small hydrating machine that I use. And so I dehydrate things like apples, mandarin oranges, kiwi, plums, strawberries, uh, all kinds of fruit, and even some tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes, I will dehydrate. And but mostly the fruit I use for snacks instead of going to the store and buying those fruit rolls or what have you. I freeze homegrown okra for soups and stir fries. And to tell you the truth, I still have a small bag of okra from last year's garden that I have been using throughout the winter season, and this small bag is left. I also, one of the things that I started doing last year was I grow sweet potatoes. And my last harvest, I didn't really feel like, baking them or cooking them right away. So what I did was I boiled them, then mashed them and froze them. And later on, I've added a portion to make cornbread, pancakes, and quick breads. So those are my little simple preservation techniques.
Yes.
Now, Deirdre, how can communities work together to reduce food loss and improve food access?
Community gardens are a great example. They allow people to grow food locally and share it with neighbors. Food pantries and community fridges are also helping redistribute food that might otherwise go to waste. And then education programs about cooking and preservation can really empower families to make the most of the food that they have. Cooperative Extension offers courses on canning, pickling, and food preservation techniques, and many of these courses are free to the public. I just love the concept of community garden. You know, for many years, I had a community garden space in my city, and it's like you pay $20 a year, you get a 10 by 15 plot, they supply all the water, and it's a great place to build community. You know, folks that are in community gardens, they get used to sharing foods. If you grow collard greens very well, I'll give you collard greens if you'll give me some of that cabbage. And so those are really great places to not only grow food, but really to build community. And I think that that is what it is all about, because it is going to take all of us to feed all of us.
Wonderful. Now, Deirdre, my last question for you is what's one message you'd like listeners to take away from today's conversation?
So I would say that food preservation isn't just about saving food. It's really about honoring culture, building community resilience, and making sure that our resources are used wisely. We have a tremendous heritage. Our ancestors often stretched food, but they also made sure that there was no waste. We have to honor our ancestors and live a life where we don't waste food and increase the food that is available to our families.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the information that you've provided today, and want to thank you, Dr. Deirdra Chester, for sharing your knowledge and insight with us. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Remember, reducing food waste and preserving food doesn't just help the environment, it strengthens our communities. I'm Dr. Ellen Harris. I'm going to go eat my Sunday dinner now: baked chicken, stir-fried vegetables, and some pickled beets. See you next time.